So I am so excited to introduce our special guest speaker today, who is Adam Prideaux, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, I hope.
That is it.
What?
That's correct.
Oh, good. Okay. My high school French has come into play here. And he is the CEO at Hallett Independent, which is one of the top boutique art and heritage insurance brokers based out of the UK. So Adam, will you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and your background?
I am, I'm, as you said, director of Hallett Independent. We're an insurance broker, so the job that I do is clients, museums, galleries, art dealers, collectors come to us and we go and find the best insurance for them. And that's not just in terms of price and the lowest premium, it's breadth of cover, flexibility, and with an insurer that understands art and pays claims. So there's lots of factors that come into play. But the key thing is that we have to understand insurance, we have to understand risk and how to advise our clients about managing the risks, because a lot of time, if you know what the risks are, you can put certain measures in place that mean you need less reliance on insurance. But an insurance broker is more than just somebody who just provides an insurance to a gallery. We have a very close relationship with galleries that is about advice in lots of areas, even areas that, where you don't actually need insurance for.
Well, I mean, that sounds great. So it's much more holistic than some people might expect.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, you've kind of already told us about Hallett Independent. Of course, because Annika just came in, just to say, my name is Mackenzie, everybody. Hello. This should have come before. But my name is Mackenzie, and I'm the head of digital marketing at Articheck. And of course, today we also have Annika with us, who is our founder and CEO. So thank you, Annika, for being with us today.
Thanks. Hello, everyone.
Okay, so what specifically, Adam, is your background? Have you always been in insurance, or what is your attachment to the industry?
Well, pretty much. I mean, I left university. I studied history and economics at university quite a long time ago. I left and worked in a gallery in London, and I loved art. Unfortunately for me, the 1991, which was quite a long time ago, was a devastating recession, and it destroyed the art market. I mean, pretty much globally, and it was really the end of the great boom, the Japanese boom, which had been buying art. And the number of galleries in London went down almost to, single figures. I mean, it was really a terrible time. I left the gallery I was working in and managed to get a job working with an insurance company who had a division that did art. And I couldn't believe it. What good fortune, because I loved art. It was the beginning days of art insurance, and I loved it, and I really have never looked back. So for the last 28 years or so, that's what I've done, looking after galleries and museums and collectors. So yes, I would say I've pretty much done it all my life. Yeah, my working career.
Yeah, well, I think, if art is something that means a lot to you, you find a way to make it a part of your professional work one way or another, right? I think that's what
we joke in insurance. It always helps if you're insuring something that you love and you enjoy. There are lots of people I know who do insurance who might insure boats or planes because they have an interest in that. I mean, insurance is not necessarily the most exciting profession to be in, but if you're doing working in an area that you love, it is incredibly rewarding.
Yeah.
So
wow.
yeah.
I like that. I think that's fantastic. So first, before we jump into all of the nitty-gritty of insurance for art during COVID-19, I first wanted to do our first poll. So today we're going to do 2, which is going to be exciting. So I will share this first one with everybody, and this is to kind of get a better idea of what we might be talking about today, and particularly what organizations are concerned about right now. So I'm going to launch this poll right now, and everyone has access to it. Please feel free to choose whichever option best applies to your organization. So this is the question we're asking. Is your organization planning to send art across borders in the next 12 months? So mostly we're talking about country borders. Could it be borders between regions as well? And your answers might be yes, no question, no, we've canceled all international movements, unsure, we're most worried about insurance, unsure, we're most worried about valuable objects being stuck abroad, or unsure, we are most worried about sending, oh, well, for some reason that didn't finish the sentence, did it? Okay, so I can't see the rest of that answer, but I know that everyone else can see it. So that one is about sending couriers. And then unsure, worried about our budget. So I'm actually very interested to see what everyone's most concerned about, or not concerned at all. And you're just planning ahead and ready for reopenings. Give everyone a minute to complete that.
I can't see a poll, but maybe it's just me. Is everyone else seeing it okay?
Oh yeah, the attendees will be able to see it. I didn't make it so that you could answer. Sorry.
Okay.
For what it's worth, I've got it on my screen, but that's...
Yeah. As soon as I end it, you should be able to see the results, I think. Okay, if anyone else wants to answer, choose your option now or forever hold your peace. Okay, awesome. So here are our results. Our number 1 is yes, no question, which I'm actually going to share it so everyone can see it. I absolutely love the optimism. I think that's great, and that organizations are moving forward planning for the next 12 months. The next is people are worried about valuable objects being stuck abroad, and they're worried about sending couriers. So these are definitely things that we can talk about today. So that's great. Thank you everyone for your feedback. Okay, so the first question I have for you, Adam, just to kick things off and kind of have a clarification before we dive deeper, is could you quickly outline for us the difference between insurance and reinsurance?
Well, it's a very good point, because I was wondering why this was being headed as insurance and reinsurance. I mean, insurance is what I do. I'm an insurance broker. Clients come to me and I go and find insurance. And reinsurance is insurance for insurers. So actually, I know a little bit about reinsurance, but I'm not a reinsurance broker. So the whole thing about insurance is the passing of risk from one person to another person. So if you're a business or a gallery, when you're setting up, you could choose not to have insurance. So you could just say, well, I'm going to take all the risk that there's a flood or a fire. I will take that risk myself. Or for a small fee, which is the premium, you could pass this risk on to someone else. Mm-hmm. And it's insurance is a sort of facilitator. It really helps businesses grow, because they don't have to take, this risk, which can mean they have to hold back assets. But the same applies to insurers. So insurers, in turn, they don't take all the risk. Sometimes they pass it on to other insurance companies known as reinsurers. So it's very rare in conversations like this that we would even bring reinsurers into it. It's basically, they're a mechanism that allow insurance companies to trade. Insurance companies don't want to take all the risk of their clients. They like to spread it, just as businesses do. So I mean, I think maybe Annika can comment. There may have been someone joining from Munich Re who's a big reinsurance company, and I don't know if that was the reason why this is brought up. But I personally, in this conversation, I don't think many people will need to know too much about reinsurance.
Yeah, so, the reason that we added it on to be included in this particular webinar is because we have actually found that in a number of discussions, reinsurance has come up, particularly for art that during this period is stuck in other places in the world. So reinsurance has come up and become something that has been bantied around in conversation, but I don't think everyone, like you said, knows exactly what it is. So I thought it was important so that people could understand what it is and what they need to know about it, essentially.
Well, it would be good to know the context of it. Reinsurance, often when there are very, very substantial claims, catastrophes, hurricanes, for example, it always involve reinsurers. And often what drives the insurance market and the price, the premiums, are the premiums that reinsurers give to insurance companies. So when reinsurance is cheap, the market is for insurance is very competitive. But if you've had lots of catastrophes and disasters and reinsurers have been paying out, then they start putting their prices up. Now, specifically in relation to what's going on in the world right now, I can't think of a reason why to museums or galleries there'll be any mention about what's going on with reinsurance. Now, so I would really need to know what the context of the question is.
Sure.
Unless it is
perhaps. Sorry. I was just going to say, perhaps it's in the wider context of the fact that there are a lot of, generally, a lot of people trying to make claims in the world right now for loss of revenue and business.
Well, that I'm sure that is the case now. It may be very different in the US. I mean, and this is where my professional skill and knowledge of the market in the US is, I'm not really able to comment on it. But yes, you're right. There are a lot of commercial galleries and museums who would like at the moment to make claims under their business interruption insurances, which is usually an add-on to these specialist museum or gallery policies. And I suppose in the context of this discussion, a reinsurance might come up because if these insurance companies had to pay out all these claims, I think it's understood that most of these companies would go bust. There isn't enough money in the world, in the insurance markets, including the reinsurance markets, to pay all these claims. The reality, I think, as it's been playing out over the past 6 weeks, is that most, I mean, and it's really incredibly unfortunate, but most business interruption insurances are not paying out, either because of a number of reasons. There's a very specific exclusion for communicable disease, which would include COVID-19, or the terms where perhaps an insurer might have given what we call a write back, some additional cover. It's excluded because of very specific reasons. And there is a lot of, there's a groundswell of unhappiness that insurers are not doing the right thing, the honourable thing in supporting their clients. The flip side is, were they to pay out, they would probably all go bust, which would mean if you look into the future, it would be very hard to obtain insurance, or it would be at a greatly increased price. So that's possibly where reinsurance has come up in the context, the global context of premiums in the insurance market. Is there enough money there to pay these claims globally if every claim was accepted?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right.
And maybe, I think we're going to be talking later about the future, and you know, the impact that this global crisis will have on insurance moving forward. But I know that I read today an article about the fact that they're reviewing legislation in America, which legislation changes that might even affect existing premiums, which seems unlikely to, you know, fly, I guess. But maybe could apply for future premiums rather than current premiums. But anyway, that's kind of an interesting wider aspect, I guess, but maybe not something that applies specifically to the art world. I guess we can talk about that later.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think what you're saying about business interruption insurance is really interesting, and it sounds like a trend, right, that is sort of global with the COVID-19 pandemic. Adam, are there any other trends you've noticed in the art insurance market during this period that you think the audience should be aware of?
There are no specific trends. I mean, the number one topic is, do you have a valid claim for business interruption? So if you have business interruptions as an extension of your museum or commercial art dealing policy, do you have a claim? This is the fundamental question. Now, have you spoken to your broker? Have you explored the possibilities? If the insurer has declined the claim, what are you doing to challenge it? Have you even spoken to a lawyer? Or are you part of an action group? Because as it stands at the moment, I mean, here in the UK, there are a number of action groups who've got together, backed by litigation funding. And by the way, litigation funding only comes about if there is, you know, a likely, or someone has said there's the possibility of success in the case. But they're going to challenge the insurer's decision to decline these claims. So you might have had a claim declined, but there are still routes to trying to get some money from insurers. Now, there are some clients who've actually had claims already paid, because the great, and this is interesting. The problem when you talk about museums and galleries, it looks like one large homogenous group, all with the same type of insurance, but unfortunately they're not. There are many different insurers, and an even wider range of insurance policies with different terms and conditions. And this is the real problem, is that they're all different. And of course, when you get one gallery talking to another gallery saying, oh, what's happened with your business interruption claim? Has it been paid, or has it been declined? And there are galleries out there who have and I would say they've been incredibly fortunate. And it's not through the skill of brokers or insurers. It's simply because the policy wordings were sufficiently wide that just didn't have an exclusion relating to coronavirus or communicable disease. It's worth noting that the insurer's intention was never to provide this kind of cover for, global-wide lockdown. This was not the intention of insurers to provide this cover. But nonetheless, some policies have responded, and clients are receiving interim payments for what we call fixed costs. The difficulty here is, if you're one of those galleries, you say to your friend down the road with a gallery, we've actually got some money from insurers. That makes the people who are not getting paid out pretty upset. So there's such a myriad of different insurers and terms and conditions that it makes providing advice to a large group of professionals in an area extremely difficult. And so every single museum and gallery needs to look at their individual terms, why they've got it. If they don't have business interruption insurance, which, by the way, is an essential area of cover. I mean, you just, business continuity, this business interruption was designed for physical damage, which is a fire or a flood. If you have a fire and you have to close your gallery, you need money to either pay your loss of profits to keep you going, or to cover the cost, your operating costs of that space while it is closed. If you don't have it, and by the way, it's very inexpensive. So, people watching need to say, well, if I don't have it, why don't I have it? Why has my broker not offered it to me? This should be absolutely standard for museums and galleries. I've forgotten really what the question was, but.
No, I think that was great advice. I mean, I think also just the steps that people can take beyond, okay, my claim is declined.
Yeah,
nothing else I can do.
I remember you asked about trends, and I mean, there aren't any specific trends, but what is happening is it's claims. It's all about claims right now. Do you have a valid claim? If not, why not? Now, with the sort of global shutdown, as an insurance broker, we're seeing no activity. So there's no activity with art fairs, shipping. Normally in a day we're called up to say, this exhibition is going from here to here. That's not happening at all. So obviously everything's static. So what everybody needs to be aware of is, are they completely sure that the terms of their policy covers works that, let's say, are stuck in transit somewhere? So if they were shipping an exhibition to, from New York to Paris, but it's got delayed somewhere and it's been impossible to send it on because of the social distancing, the lockdown, is it still insured? Does the policy still cover it? Have they extended these exhibition insurances to cover any delays? I mean, it does require paying attention to what cover you have and where works are. So that is definitely, I would say, a trend, an important thing to consideration.
So I think what you're saying is interesting about it getting stuck in transit. What about if something was sent somewhere, it reached its final destination, but now it's stuck there and can't make its way back?
Well, this is about ensuring that making sure that the insurer is aware. So if it is stuck somewhere, all you need is to contact the broker or the insurer to say, look, this work that you're insuring it hasn't returned. If you do nothing and the policy expires, you're out of cover. I mean, you can't expect insurers necessarily to step in, and they're not going to mind read about delays. However, we'll add something very important. Certainly here in the UK, the regulator here, called the financial, the FCA, has said that you can't treat customers unfairly because of these extraordinary situations we're going through at the moment. Now, that's not an excuse not to report to them, like delays in transits or exhibitions, but if you fail to do it, insurers are being told you need to be understanding. But I would say it is essential that people pay attention. What is where and is it covered? So they need to look at the specifics of the policy.
So if you haven't done it yet, better do it now.
Yeah. How far in advance do you think they need to contact when something is not able to return?
As soon as possible. I mean, generally, if you're talking about a loan, let's say a loan to an exhibition, the period of the insurance will usually include a month, maybe 6 weeks, either side of the exhibition period for the transits to and from the venue. If there is a 2-month delay, I mean, if you've gone past the expiry date of the policy, you can still extend that insurance. However, it's better to do it as soon as possible, because there then becomes this interesting issue of condition reporting. You know, if a policy has finished and you want to restart a policy, that can be very difficult, because you want continuity, or you will have to start doing in short period. Look like you've frozen.
Are you there?
Yep, I'm here.
Oh, okay. We just missed
You
your last sentence.
Oh, I was just saying the importance of informing.
Continuity.
Sorry? Continuity. Exactly.
That's where we lost you.
Continuity. Don't let the insurance run past the expiry date. You know, so
Yeah.
if you've got a loan insurance and the expiry date is the 1st of June, you know, don't wait to extend it on the 2nd of June, you know, because, right. or worse, later, because that period where an insurance is no longer in place, you will need to go and get condition reports done again. It just makes the whole process of insurance much more complicated. There are many loans stuck in places around the world, and it's a matter of a phone call to extend the terms of the policy. Unfortunately for the borrower or whoever's paying the premium, it will mean an additional premium, I would think. I mean, unless it's a relatively modest valued work. So there are additional costs, certainly.
Got it. So what factors, and we've already been talking about this a little bit, but what specific factors do you think should be considered when insuring art for the first time during the pandemic? So let's say someone, you know, we do have some online art fairs going on, and galleries are able to sell online, and museums, you know, may start to open their channels again to do loans and exhibitions. What should they consider?
In Switzerland, there's some museums opening up next week, I think.
Yeah, and same on International Museum Day on the 18th, Portugal and Italy open their museums as well. Mm-hmm. So let's say, just, you know, off the top of my head, from Frieze Viewing Room, we have a piece that is sold and then it needs to be shipped, you know, across the world from the US to Asia. What should people consider?
Well, this is a good, interesting topic, because if it's a gallery, so doing, let's say, exhibiting at Frieze online, they've put a work there. Presumably that work is either in the gallery or in storage, and they want to send it to their client. Obviously, it is essential that condition reports are done before it goes. You know, is it in a good condition? In the absence of actually being able to look at it and see it in the flesh, you know, where it's actually on the booth at the fair, you know, you need to check that it's okay. Now, I'm not sure. I think some of the art shippers have started working again, but they're certainly not at full capacity. And what we have seen, we've seen as a broker, is that a lot of galleries have been coming to us to say, can we use a courier? Could we send it, you know, via a courier company? Which, you know, are operating pretty much as normal. Now, the problem with this is just all to do with the terms of your policy. Really, the difference between sending things by a courier or a fine art shipper are you know, chalk and cheese. I mean, they're very, very different methods. Lots of people like to use couriers because it's cheap, it's quick, and it's efficient. And, you know, why not? You're saving money. You're not taking the risk, the insurer's taking the risk. But it is significantly more risky. And almost every single art dealing policy will have some kind of restriction to do with sending things by courier. So you must not just automatically assume that works are covered when sending by a courier.
I think it's also worth mentioning that because we did a webinar, our first webinar with Adam from ARTA, was about the kind of supply chain for logistics right now in America and globally. And one of the key findings of that was the fact that generally speaking, when shippers are not working, it's normally because they don't have work. It's a demand issue rather than anything else. So chances are, if you do want to move something, that if you contact the fine art shipper you normally work with, they will be very happy to assist you.
Right. Okay. But I think just, the galleries will have their insurances, unless they've reduced their transit cover, will have automatic transit cover, but that will be operative only if they're using a sort of accredited fine art shipper. But, there is great pressure on operating costs now because of the fear of this dramatic slowdown in the market. And it's the same for insurance. We acknowledge that insurance is a major expense for galleries and museums. And there is pressure to reduce these costs. And, you must be ready to negotiate on them. But that doesn't mean, things like shipments, sending valuable works by courier. Just to give an example, here in the UK, the kind of limits on art dealing policies is about £20,000. So it's a very modest amount. Maybe you might be allowed to send up to 50,000, but that's pretty rare. But generally over that, forget it. Courier is not going to work. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah. So when you're saying courier, just for our, across the pond friends, you mean companies like?
Yes. FedEx, DHL. I mean, to name, but not. I don't mean a courier from a registrar from a museum. No, I mean, right. I mean, something where someone arrives at your gallery door and on a motorbike, and it's
yeah, exactly.
Away. Yeah.
UPS, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
So a couple comments. K-Pack, James says skeleton crews at most of the shippers that, including themselves, but working. And then Annika says, in Canada, transportation deemed an essential service, which I think is the case in most countries right now. And so there's new ways of operating, though, that they have to follow, obviously, right? Which is also something you mentioned. Operating costs are changing because of the requirements also of the pandemic, right?
Air freight's gone up a lot, for example.
Yeah. And then just also, the cost of having to run like a warehouse or a dock, but having to have only a certain number of people there because they have to be a certain distance apart and things like that. And Clarenza says, museum registrar, I never accept any courier delivery at our costs. If the owner wants to take the responsibility, they are free to do so. That's very smart.
Yeah. Right. Correct.
Yeah. So so other factors that we might want to consider when insuring art during the pandemic, besides the method of transport.
I don't know. I mean, I suppose one of the key things is given that there's a lockdown and everyone has had to temporarily close the galleries. I have noticed in the past 6 weeks, quite a few people ring up to say, look, I've closed the gallery and therefore, do I have to pay any insurance? My gallery's closed. Which is not an altogether, obvious conclusion to come to. I mean, why not? It's closed. But if you're an insurer, where you look at this, you think, well, actually, the risk to the insurance is much greater when premises are unoccupied. And right. I think this is something that is often, everybody suddenly had a panic. There's no income coming in. They're not making the sales they normally make. They need to cut their operating costs. He thought, right, well, let's cut insurance. What the first thing that people have got to do, and which I'm sure they've already done, is nearly all insurances have things called unoccupancy clauses. So in other words, if you're not in your home or your gallery for a period of time, let's say 30 days, often insurances will stop covering things like flood and fire. So you must check your insurances that, and insurers are all ready to cooperate, and they're not going to be putting in penalties, or they shouldn't be. But so the things you can do to address this is make sure that you haven't left works of art in the windows, in your gallery window. You've got to put them away, certainly if they're particularly valuable. You've got to make sure that the alarms are working, not just the security alarm, but a fire alarm. Turn off the water. So, because the insurer's biggest concern with a premises closed is there's a leak. And if no one's there, the leak will just go on for weeks. And it just leads to a catastrophic claim.
Good point.
Yeah, especially, I mean, for any premises, right? Museums as well.
Indeed, for any premise, for any home, anything. The other thing that insurers were very concerned about, it was that, particularly with museums, and I think it's generally the smaller museums, I'm not talking the big national museums, where they have valuable collections, but they don't have the resources, the staffing resources, that, say, a national collection might have. And certainly here in the UK, they're often independent museums in the outside sort of urban areas. And they have valuable collections. They don't have full-time 24-hour security. So what kind of measures should they be doing? Actually, insurers are concerned that they're potentially high risk from break-ins. Thefts. So it is important that...
Can those museums take out some kind of insurance, or can they do something to mitigate that risk that allows them to have more staff in these kinds of situations?
Not that I know of, but of course the problem here is if suddenly you're closed and people are not coming and paying their entrance fee to come, your income drops dramatically, and having to get 24-hour guards in is hugely expensive. What's actually happened is that insurers have all said, look, we understand the situation you're in, but maybe you would consider putting in inexpensive CCTV, or there's some relatively simple measures to put in place that can mitigate some of the additional risks that exist from unoccupied premises. And I think this is an important point wherever you are in the world. Yes, your business or gallery is closed, but there are actually increased risks. Now, you could spin it the other way, which is to say, well, my gallery has closed and I'm not sending anything. Now, I know that the biggest risk to art is when it's being moved. So if there are no transits, or very few transits, then that is a huge reduction in risk for insurers. And I think this sort of links into this business about how to reduce operating costs, particularly insurance. So if you're not sending things around the world, either get rid of or reduce your transit limit. So all galleries should be saying to their brokers and insurers, look, we're not sending things around the world. We'd like to reduce this limit and get some money back. So obviously you also need to get money back. If you were going to an art fair and you haven't actually gone to it, you need to make sure that you're getting the premium back for that too. The other thing is, if you've also, applies to a commercial gallery, if you've also returned work, as lots of galleries were doing to artists, for example, then the total value that you're insuring under your policy is going to reduce. So again, that is where you can get a reduced premium. So these are all little techniques that, when you add them all up, can be quite a substantial sum. So these are things definitely to think about that all stem from a gallery being closed because of the pandemic.
Yeah, I think those are some really great ways to, mitigate risk going forward, right? Or to reduce costs, which also mitigates risk in this period for businesses, right? So we were talking about, I know Annika and you have had conversations about what you can add to your agreement to make it less risky for the business going forward. So like automatic extensions, or making sure that if something does get stuck, it's being taken care of. What do you think about these types of measures? Do you think they're effective, or they're something that would be helpful to be implemented?
Well, and for background, what we're talking about specifically is adding a universally agreed clause that all museums agree to for loans, that for lender agreements, that if something is stuck at a venue, that venue will look after it, that it will store it, that it will secure it, so that they don't have to worry as much about future lockdowns and what might happen if something does get stuck abroad in future, because we've identified that is a major concern for a lot of museums right now. And so I know we spoke about that last week, Adam, and I don't know if you have any further comments on that.
Well, I think the comment I would make is that the first place that needs to be addressed is the loan agreement, which obviously is not kind of the insurance side.
Sure.
But the insurance, and my experience dealing with insurers, is that they will do everything to help clients to make the way they conduct business and the way they arrange insurances is to be as helpful to the the museum and wider art world as possible. So if a work is stuck somewhere, they are never going to say, no, we're not going to extend the insurance. And I see no reason why there shouldn't be some ability to extend policies automatically. The question is going to be about premium. If you have to extend for a month, is that going to be free, or will insurers charge for it? If it's only a matter of a few days, I would think generally they'll be happy to waive the cost. So it's hard to give something in a sort of a general approach, but I would think that yes, it's very easy to do. But I come back to this point that all the registrars and galleries need to be focused on, they need to, if they haven't got a copy of the policy in place for loans that have gone out, they really need to get it in front of them, so they can see when does it expire, what are the terms of it, or just ask their broker.
Sure.
Simple as that.
Sure. And
well, one other thing that we discussed in our call last week that again kind of addresses a concern that a lot of museums have voiced right now, which is sending couriers over the next year or two. And both in terms of the health, potential health implications for asking staff to do that, but also the costs, because air freight has gone up, but also we anticipate air ticket passenger plane prices to go up as well. Traditionally in the US, couriers are flown on business class. So it's quite already a high cost to bear for museums. And I know you mentioned, we talked a little bit about one of the solutions that we're looking at is providing a service, a tool within Articheck to take video of the key moments of the crate moving from the truck to the plane, or wherever it may be moving, and also to have, we already have a sign on screen feature and a little kind of tick box with a legal statement to say, this video is accurate, and to not allow edited films to be uploaded, but just raw footage to be taken from within the system, and I know that you and also a reinsurer that I spoke to mentioned that they thought that this would be a useful thing for the industry to help support, things traveling, reducing costs, and also even gaining more data for insurers around, trends and what's happening. So I know you mentioned before that you thought that that this kind of thing shouldn't have a negative insurance implication, but maybe
no. So, far from it. I think the one thing I would say is the more there's documentation, video evidence, condition reporting during the transit process helps enormously with resolving claims. The biggest problem we have with claims is the lack of condition reporting, the inability to say at any point in the transit process or where damage occurred. Did it occur before this insurance began, or did it occur after it? And therefore, which insurer is liable to pay? So that's the first thing. That's a fantastic. That really assists insurers. The point about couriers are that I don't know an insurance company that has ever said this work must travel with a courier. These are not conditions that generally get imposed by insurers. Museums have a duty of care to the objects that they look after, and they are in the business of looking after these objects. In fact, they are the best risk managers you could ever have for objects. Much better, I should say, than the majority of commercial galleries, because commercial galleries have a profit loss implication. I'm sure they'd all love to use the most expensive packing materials and the shippers and send couriers with all their works, but they'd never turn a profit if they did.
Right.
Now, insurers understand just how good the museum world's management of risk is, and couriers is an integral part of that. Taking that away, so not having a person travel with a work, I don't think there is no insurance that says if a work is damaged and there's no courier, we're not paying a claim because there's no courier.
Well, I think that's an important point for everyone in this webinar to understand.
The point, and I think this will apply, I can't, as I said at the very beginning, I can't speak specifically in the US, for example, but the claims generally doesn't come from the museum world, it comes from the commercial art dealing world, and where there's a different approach to risk. And
no couriers there, as you mentioned too.
Well, of course, no couriers, but different quality of care to do with the packing and the shipping of works, and just they're in the business of selling works and making money by selling works. They're not in the business of looking after these works and preserving them for generations to come, which often means there's no expense spared. So they're very hard to assess at the same time. But I think I know that if I went to an insurer here in the UK and said, would you be happy to insure this National Museum's loans? They won't be using couriers anymore. I'm sure they will say, well, they must be maintaining the risks and assessing the risks throughout the journey. So if they're using what you're providing, then that would seem an extremely good substitute.
Thank you. Well, and going back to what you said a moment ago about condition reporting too, I think it's maybe useful in the context of this insurance and claims discussion to mention, because I know a lot of people say to me, oh, well, I don't need condition reports for contemporary artwork because it's new, right? Primary market. And we're always saying to people, you need to have a baseline for comparison, you need to have condition reports for insurance purposes. If you're changing insurance, that's something that you told me that a lot of people are not aware of. And I think that's a really important general point to make when we're talking about insurance in the art world. But having that chain of custody, so whose liability it was under when an incident occurred, is
my job as a broker is to anticipate problems. The worst thing I can have is that there's a problem, and problems come about when there's a claim, where there's a claim that's either not going to be paid, or where an insurer says, well, are we sure this damage happened whilst we were insuring it? Now, this is, the sort of classic example is works of art that have been in storage for many years. And during that time, the owner may have changed insurance companies.
Right.
Now, let's say 10 years down the line, they come to take a work out of storage and they go, oh dear, it's damaged. Well, they've changed the insurance during the previous 10 years. We have no idea, in the absence of a condition report at any point, where that damage might have occurred. Did it even occur in the previous 10 years, or was it done, 20 years ago? So the thing is, you are then faced with a problem. And the one thing that we encourage collectors and galleries, everyone, all the time, is art needs to be recorded. Its state, its condition needs to be recorded as often as possible to eliminate all these issues that can potentially go wrong. And whoever said that contemporary art didn't need condition reporting, I'm afraid needs their head examining. I can't put it in blunter terms, because contemporary art has a habit of being made of materials and media that's often new, that even the smallest bit of damage, where the surface can be everything in the value of a work, can render works valueless.
Yeah, it's so difficult to retouch as well.
The smallest scratch on a work that cannot be repaired and that can leave this work unsaleable. It's lost all its value. Now, if you are unable to determine where that scratch occurred, how can you get a claim successfully paid? By having a condition report at a certain point in time, you can go back and say, well, on this date, this work was in perfect condition.
Right.
Now we come forward to this date and we can see, oh, look, there's that scratch. Therefore, it's happened during this time. And therefore, the liability is the insurer that was during this time.
Right.
That resolves the problems.
Yeah, or if a piece of artwork gets eaten, that also could be a potential value.
Yes, claims.
Value
Artworks have
conundrum.
been eaten. Yes. That's happened. There's all things that can go wrong. Yeah, claims get thrown away by cleaners. There are, but it's damage. And the reason this is so significant is there are multiple reasons, but there are works now which are fetching, have been, the trend has been, prices have been going up and up and up, and the market is looking for works in perfect condition. And there are a lot of collectors that will not buy works even with the slightest bit of damage or restoration. And a crucial part of art insurance is loss of value, depreciation claims. And to substantiate, to even get to that point of being able to pay a depreciation claim, you've got to be able to determine where damage occurred. And if there are no condition reports, then that makes it almost impossible to do. And I think now, given that condition reporting is so easy, it is not as it used to be, where you took out your pad of paper and scribbled it down. I mean, we know about Articheck. It's almost inexcusable not to be doing it. And I think it is very frustrating. The insurance industry, as brokers and insurers, they will all say, why is there not more attention in the art world to the condition of works? because it resolves problem claims.
Yeah. So Vanessa says, couldn't agree more about contemporary art. We're already at our hour. Would you be okay, Adam, to stick around a bit longer and answer a few questions
Sure.
from the attendees? Amazing. So Flamini, I think we talked quite a bit about couriers. If you have a follow-up question to that, please pop it in the Q&A. I'm gonna go down to the next one, which is Chris, and he says, normal practice for shippers is to transport by vehicle with 2 drivers. Will this clause be lifted or renegotiated due to present situation, or would a follow car suffice?
Good question.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, an insurer doesn't, the requirement for an insurance to be valid for moving art is that works are moved using a fine art shipper. There isn't something in policies that says there has to be 2 people in the van. But it professionally, for an art shipper, you can't send trucks out with valuable works in with just 1 person. I mean, if you need to pull over and fill up with gas, what are you going to do? You can't leave the truck unattended. So I think that's a question for the shippers to answer. Keeping 2 meter distance, I don't think that's big enough in the cabs to have that. So presumably it'd be 1 person driving and a follow car. But
I think that makes good sense.
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's see here. David, you mentioned epidemic clauses in business continuity insurance. Have you ever seen epidemic exclusions in fine art insurance?
I haven't, because it's not really, it's not relevant. I mean, I'm trying to think what sort of context you would have, but no, these are not, there aren't exclusions in a policy for art itself, no.
Yeah, I think that's actually something I've heard a couple times about people being worried about, is that they don't want to move things partially because of the worry that it won't be covered because of COVID. So you're saying that's not necessarily a concern.
Well, what do you, I mean, can you give me an example?
So like, for example, if something does get stuck across the world and is, let's say, in storage, right, for a prolonged period of time, maybe it's subpar storage, or we have a question that's coming up soon that's about storage being going bankrupt and closing, and your art is sitting there. What happens?
Okay, so this is not okay. Well,
so not that your art contracts COVID-19. That's not the concern.
But the girl with the pearl earring does not get COVID-19.
Yeah. If an artwork is stuck somewhere, it's a question of extending the insurance to continue the cover.
Because it should be covered for the transit itself is planned.
It's not going to be, I mean, I can't think of, I'd be very, very surprised if an insurer suddenly said, no, we're not extending the insurance. I think that would be treated by regulators anywhere as not treating the customer fairly. So no, I can't see that happening. But in terms of a storage facility going bust, well, then the whole issue about insurance is that the work continues to be insured there, but it's really a question of whether the facility is releasing the work. If the facility, for some reason, holds on to it, then the specific terms of the policy will need to be looked at, because it's not. Some people confuse it with, if it's being held as a to pay a debt, let's say, then that's not theft. So it's what I would say. There's a very good COVID-19 sort of crisis management document that's been put together by Art Tactic, who you may know. I'm sure you know. But there's a very good, you go online, and Art Tactic have put together a sort of COVID-19 crisis management document for galleries and museums, which includes things like, what if a storage facility goes bust? What if a client reneges on a deal because their business has gone bust and they don't have any money? Well, it poses lots of questions on both legal, accountancy, and insurance, and so that is a very useful resource to go to.
Thank you. That's useful.
Yeah, we'll
I think
definitely have to get a hold of that.
That sanitation question looks quite interesting.
Yeah. So let me just close out phase questions. Is that
does a normal fine art insurance cover damage caused by sanitation of exhibition galleries, or damages originated by the use of sanitation products, i.e., touching art with gloves with sanitation residue, for example?
So there are again, there are multiple different insurers around the world with different terms and conditions for art insurance policies, but all risks insurance for art has the premise is everything is covered unless it is specifically excluded. So I would be very surprised if there is an insurance out there for art that has, damage by cleaning product or wearing gloves or anything of that. What exists is there are often exclusions for pests, vermin, oxidization, changes in temperature. Now, of course, this goes back to the point I was making about when your galleries are closed. If you are not there and you suddenly get an infestation of mice, let's say, or your humidity, air condition, goes wrong, and there are changes in temperature, these will be exclusions probably on your art insurance. So it's extremely important that, again, you are aware of the exclusions and that you're doing something to mitigate that. So, if you have to close your gallery for 2 months, you need to make sure that when you visit it, just to check that it's in order, you're doing a bit of pest control. Are there any signs of mice on the floor? Are they eating the packing cases? Have they got into, a Joseph Beuys, velvet felt work, which I've names for that before. So,
oh gosh.
So it's being aware of the terms of the policy. What are the exclusions? If you don't know them, then what you need to do is you need to ask your broker, what are the exclusions on my insurance? And I don't think it'll be anything to do with cleaning or sanitation products.
Well, and just while I think of it, while you mentioned the temperature changes, I also want to quickly mention, while we're on the topic of insurance, that one of the projects that we're going to be launching soon is called Art Goes Green. And it's all about museums and galleries globally adopting the Bizoit Green Protocol for the climate control of artwork in your building, your facility, because buildings climate control is like 40% of the art world's carbon footprint. It's a really huge aspect. And so the Bizoit Green Protocol is about relaxing conditions and putting very fragile things into microclimates, in frames, and display cases. And it's worth just mentioning that in our call last week, we touched on this point, and you mentioned that, much like the courier thing, the insurers kind of trust museums and art professionals to know the right kind of conditions for artwork, and that museums and galleries adopting the Green Protocol shouldn't have an implication in terms of their insurance and coverage. It's not an exclusion, for example. Is that right?
Well, the thing is, on the majority of art insurances, there are exclusions relating to changes in condition as a result of changes in temperature, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can't think of a claim that I've dealt with that has been for that, but I think the important thing here is that you've got to know the terms of the policy. Certainly for the national museums here, and I believe in the US too, there won't be exclusions relating to changes in temperature. So that will not be something that will concern them. But again, it is just about knowing the detail of your insurance.
Sure. But I mean, I imagine those, if there was one, it would be about extreme changes rather than, a couple of degrees that the BISWAY protocol is talking about.
Yes.
But
Yeah,
I guess people
exactly.
would need to double check
I mean,
that.
what insurers are getting at by putting in these exclusions is saying, if you have a Rauschenberg wax painting and it gets left in a truck on the highway in the desert, going through Utah, for example, and it melts, they're not going to be liable to pay for that. These
Sure.
sort of extreme changes that causes damage.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So before we have a couple other questions and then we'll wrap up, I'm just going to put up our second poll, which is about mitigating risk, all about what we're talking about now. So here we go. Here are your options. So which of the following, you can choose as many as you think are applicable, would alleviate your concerns about international art movement? So clauses in insurance agreement for automatic extension, care clause in lender or consignment agreement, promising security and storage of items if they get stuck, and then a virtual courier tool if approved by lawyers and insurance, of course, which it sounds like Adam is optimistic about that being helpful. Documentation, right? That's what you're saying. It's important, as much documentation as possible.
Yeah, I am.
Thank you so much for your feedback, everybody. I think a really great thing that has come out of this Art Evolve series is just allowing people who work in, industries that assist sort of primary art organizations, so technology companies like us, to know what you need during this period so that we can help. And I think
Absolutely.
a lot of other organizations doing this too. They're really just trying to figure out what can we do for galleries and museums and collectors to make the art world, less risky to. For all of your feedback. We're almost going to close it out in just a minute. Awesome. Okay. So I'll share the results so everyone can see. You can now see that our biggest one is promising security and storage of items. So a care clause in lender agreements or consignment agreements, which I think that's really interesting. It's something we should definitely look into and see what we can do. And then extension clauses and virtual couriers all come up in second place. So fantastic, thanks. So I think just one or two more questions and then we'll get finished because I know we're rolling over time here. So here is one or two more, let's see.
Here's one. Relating to the example of changing policy providers for items in long-term storage, would it not be prudent for insurers to require detailed condition reports prior to initiating coverage on a new policy?
Correct. Yes. Yes, they do, but some insurers and brokers, and I can't, some are keen to get new business, so they sort of take. It's a risk they take. Yes, but absolutely. I mean, I try, if someone comes to me and says, would you insure the collection and some of it's in storage? I go, well, when have you last condition checked these works in storage? It's dependent on individual insurers. Some will say, we're not going to look at it until you confirm it. But then you have to remember that's quite a cost. And that cost potentially will, offset any potential saving in premium by moving insurers. So, but yes, it definitely makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So one more very COVID related question. As we're unable to remove works, but we're still selling, our insurance is constantly increasing as we have to cover the full sales price. We've already increased our overall limit once, but having to do this again will potentially cost a lot more. Any thoughts?
Well, my first thought is once you've sold a work, and you've received the money, title is transferred to the buyer. They should be responsible for insuring it. And if you're selling it to collectors, if a collector generally has policies that will cover art on a worldwide basis. Now, sometimes this is often a contentious area for galleries. They will say, well, it's still in our care and therefore we ought to insure it. But I have always, in line with a lot of insurers, taken a view that when you've sold a work and you've received the money, the liability actually transfers to the buyer. And that when you're shipping a work, you don't ship it under the gallery's insurance. If there's one point when there's going to be a claim, it will be in transit. You've sold the work, you've got the money, your liability, the gallery's liability, ends there. Now, a lot of galleries just do it as a favor, but I'm not sure that they need to, because often if there is damage, what happens is you haven't just got a claim on your hand, but you've also got a cancelled sale. The person, if the collector receives his damaged work, he's going, well, I don't want it. Give me my money back. And so you get the double whammy of having to give the money back and getting a damaged work. So I think to answer the point there is you should be getting the works that have been sold to be insured by the collectors. And as I say, these collectors have generally worldwide policies, and it will either be they need to just notify their insurer to add on the gallery address. I mean, that seems the easiest thing, but I agree that's an interesting point. But you could also say you're in a very fortunate position. You're selling works, which I think, take my hat off to you. That's great.
Yes,
but yes,
well done.
Yeah, really well done. But I can see that, yes, it is very annoying to have to increase your limit. But sold works for which you've received money should be insured at the selling price.
And just remember to transfer those condition reports to the buyer if they are taking on the insurance.
Well, that is, I mean,
there, right?
just, that is an extremely important point. If you are using your gallery policy to ship works to a buyer, you must make sure there's a condition report done, and that when the work arrives, it is checked, because it's not just left in its crate or whatever for 2 or 3 months, because if it's opened much later and there's damage, that collector will come back to you and expect you to pay for it. But you know what? There have been no condition reports all this time. It shouldn't be on your insurance. It should be on their insurance. They have to deal with it. So again, insurance this is what brokers should be advising. Also, it's a very good way of protecting your insurance, because you get claims in your policy and your premium is going to go up. So where you can pass the risk on to someone else, you should be doing so.
But at least also, if you're providing a condition report, it's like you're still providing a service. You're still doing your collector a favor in a sense.
Yeah, whether
saying,
it doesn't matter whether you're insuring it or not. I mean, a condition report is an excellent thing. And if you can send it to the collector saying, look, it's left me in perfect condition, you're now insuring it. Because again, if you don't have a condition report, when it leaves you, even if it's being insured by the collector, if it arrives damaged, they'll say, well, it must have been damaged when it was with you. It's not, not under my insurance, it's yours. But if you can show it left us in good condition, here's the condition report on this date, perfect condition, sorry, your problem.
Well, and another thing is that if a shipper is taking on insurance in a transit, or even if not, if there is a condition report that's done by a shipper, sometimes there can be a miscommunication where because of contemporary art that's made of all this weird and wonderful materials, as we talked about before, a shipper might not be familiar with the techniques or the materials being used by a particular artist, and they might accidentally misclassify something as damage. And a lot of shippers will not call things condition reports. They call them artwork defect reports for that reason, and they kind of have a little disclaimer to say, we're not conservators, but here's a mark, rather than saying it's damage or or a spa or whatever they want to say. But one thing that can make this whole process much easier and more streamlined is if the gallery initiates the report in with their own expertise and in their own wording, and they have that control that we know galleries love to have as well. And then they share that with the shipper, and the shipper is able to just kind of rubber stamp that as, saying, yeah, we agree, there's no change, there's no difference from what you've already defined and documented. And then that is what's provided to the collector. Then that is a much better, chain of custody, but also workflow for everyone concerned to avoid issues and annoying the collector, etc.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think, we've got to as many questions as we can with our overtime. I just wanted to wrap up. Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us. I think we all learned a lot today. I certainly did, but also my realm of work is not insurance. So I really enjoyed it. And thank you to everyone who attended and our 88 who stuck around until now. Thank you, Annika, for being my co-panelist this week. And of course, we will send out the recording to everybody, and any assets that go along with that. So I hope everyone has a wonderful Thursday evening, and thank you very much.
Great, and a great bank holiday for those of us in the UK. Haha.
Yes. I always forget.
Yeah, indeed.
Bank holiday tomorrow.
And good weather predicted. So hey.
That's lovely.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam.
Okay.
And thank you, everyone.
Pleasure. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.